Welcome everyone to this Pro-Con enrichment elective called Launching Your Jewish Communal Career at the JCC. If this is not the session that you intended to join, you could return to Spot Me and select a different session. Hopefully it is the session you intended to join, and we're really happy you could be here. My name is Sue Gelsey. I'm the Chief Program Officer at JCC Association of North America. And joining me today is my colleague, Yael Warwick, who is the Professional Development Manager at JCC Association of North America. Our names appear towards the top of the participant list as host and co-host. So if there's any question during the session, well, actually, I'm going to revise this. If there's any question during the session that you have, actually reach out to Yael, who's listed as host. She could address it if you're having any issues or questions, just message her directly. This session is being recorded. We hope you stay on camera with us through the session, but if you'd prefer to not be part of the recording, you could shut your camera off and hopefully keep your audio on so you're still able to participate with us. We aspire for every person to feel comfortable at Pro-Con, and we're working to create an inclusive environment. As such, we invite you to change your name within Zoom. First name, last name, the organization that you work with or for, and also to add your personal pronouns. We've also enabled the closed captioning. You have the option to turn that off. You could click on the live transcript closed caption button and you could disable that if you prefer. Otherwise, it'll show up at the bottom of your screen throughout this session. Already told you could reach out to me. Check, check, check. And very important, yet again, to acknowledge and thank our 35 tremendous, wonderful, generous sponsors who have made this conference possible for over 3,000 professionals from JCCs across North America and around the world. Without their generosity, we would not have been able to do this. We certainly would not have been able to do this at absolutely no cost to the attendees or the JCCs. So with tremendous gratitude to them. I will say this again at the end, but I encourage you to spend a little time at our live virtual vendor hall from 1:45 to 2:45 today. That's Eastern time. So it's basically right after this session. Visit 1, 2, 3 of our vendors, our sponsors, thank them for their support. And you might surprise yourself and find something really valuable for your J along the way. And now we're going to dive into our session. The JCC movement is the largest body of talent in North America Jewish community. As such, we have a huge responsibility to maintain and support a talent highway with on-ramps and off-ramps. We want to do what we can to widen those on-ramps and support the off-ramps to ensure that those off-ramps are to other Jewish organizations. So today we will hear from senior Jewish communal leaders who I have had the privilege of learning with over the last several years as part of the inaugural class of the Mandel Executive Leadership Program. Each of my colleagues, who you'll meet in just a minute, were at a JCC or federation in the past few years, and all of them have made a professional move within the last 2 years. Together, we're going to discuss our professional moves, our lessons learned, and how managers can support their own team in their career development. So I now welcome my colleagues. I'm going to introduce each of them, and then we're going to have a little conversation. We will then leave time at the end for your questions, way more important than my questions. And you'll be invited to ask those questions in one of 2 ways. You could either put them in chat, and we will pull them from there and read them, or much preferred, you could use the raise hand feature, and then we'll call on you and you could ask your question directly. Either one, we're going to do that towards the end of this session. And now, my colleagues, Adina Frydman is the CEO of Young Judaea Global. She previously spent 12 years at UJA Federation of New York, first spearheading the synagogue department Synergy, and then as Executive Director of Community Resources. Rabbi James Greene is Executive Director of Camp Laurelwood, a Jewish overnight camp in Madison, Connecticut. Prior to this role, Greene worked as the program director at the Addison Penzac JCC in Los Gatos, California, and then as the assistant executive director at Springfield JCC in Springfield, Massachusetts. Jennifer Gross is CEO of American Friends of Tel Aviv University, previously vice president at UJA Federation of New York. And before joining UJA in 2014, she was a principal and managing director at Archview Investment Group. Jesse Rosen serves as president and CEO of the Mandel JCC of the Palm Beaches. Jesse entered the JCC field nearly 8 years ago at the Harry and Rose Sampson family JCC in Milwaukee, where he served as the JCC Maccabi Games director and later as chief operating officer after nearly 20 years in the large-scale special event space. And Rabbi Hugh Seid-Valencia is the director of collaborative leadership and Jewish engagement for Jewish Silicon Valley. He previously served as the director of community engagement at the Addison Penzak JCC in Los Gatos, California. And before that, spent 10 years teaching at Kehila Jewish High School. And while I have known these people for several years, I'm even impressed when I read their bios. So I am so pleased to have you all here. I'm also not just the moderator, I'm also on this panel. As I said, I'm the chief program officer at JCC Association, and prior to joining the association, I was on the team at the Kaplan JCC on the Palisades for over 20 years in various roles, and I also worked in the fitness management business. So here we are. Let's start with each of you introducing yourselves. Obviously, we have your name, and we just gave a smidge of a bio. Introduce yourself, the organization you work with, and talk about either the moment where you moved from seeing the Jewish communal work as a job into seeing it as a career, or if you prefer, what drew you to Jewish communal work from another space? I know some of you didn't start your career here. So why did you choose this work? So let's go ahead and start with Adina.
Thank you so much, Sue. And it's really a pleasure to be here with all of you and as part of this conference with wonderful professionals. So I'm currently at Young Judaea Global. I've been the CEO of Young Judaea since October, so just touching my 6-month anniversary here. And in that, I'll tell you a sentence about what Young Judaea is. Young Judaea is a 110-year-old American youth Zionist organization. We're actually an interesting, re-startup phase, I would say. About 10 years ago, we became an independent 501c3. We had been part of Hadassah up until then. So it's a very interesting time to join an organization that has a strong legacy and tradition, but at the same time has this kind of new energy and is ready to start their next chapter. I'm going to speak very briefly to a moment where I moved to becoming a Jewish communal professional. And it's actually a series of moments very briefly when I was in college that led me to this decision of wanting to enter into Jewish communal work. I went to a private Jewish university in Central Florida where I was one of 30 Jews on campus. And so I became the president of the Jewish student organization that was there. One weekend, Elie Wiesel came to visit as a scholar in residence. And I had the privilege as the head of the Jewish student organization to actually be his escort essentially for 24 hours and spend time in deep conversation, one-on-one dialogue with Elie Wiesel. Can you imagine such a thing? So obviously it made a huge impact on me. And we spent a lot of time talking about life and purpose and responsibility and the Jewish community. So that's one moment. And then I got involved with Young Judaea through their college chapter, Hamag Shamim, around the same time, freshman, sophomore year of college, and spent a summer working as a counselor in one of our camps, Camp Tel Yehuda, our teen camp. And at that camp, I met a lot of people, both who are Jewish professionals, people who are in various parts of their Jewish journeys, kind of coming in and out. And coming out of that summer, I had a very clear sense that I wanted to go into Jewish communal work. Up until then, I had been an aspiring opera singer and sort of took a sharp turn towards cantorial school, which was the beginning of the story. I'll leave the rest for later. That's my beginnings.
Thanks, Adina. That's a few turns. And I don't think I heard the Elie Wiesel story before, so that'll have to be pinned for a future get together. James, how about you?
Sure, thank you, Sue. It's wonderful to be here. I'm Rabbi James Greene. I'm the executive director at Camp Laurelwood, which is an 84-year-old independent Jewish overnight camp, residential camp. And actually, we just celebrated our 84th birthday yesterday. So happy birthday to camp, which is always great. I think, much like Adina, actually, I started my professional work in music. I was a saxophonist at the Kansas City Conservatory of Music, and I remember being in in a practice room, and I had been in that practice room in this little box, sort of for several hours, working on a particular section of music, and I remember thinking, like, I was really missing my community, missing being with other people, and I thought to myself, that's just not what I wanted. I really wanted for my life to be about community organizing and about the work of serving my community. And so it became clear to me that while there were lots of things I loved about being involved in music and lots of things I loved about music education, that I wanted to make a shift. And so I spent time in Israel after that, in a year abroad at Hebrew University, and came back with a very clear sense that I wanted to shift and saw myself moving into Jewish professional work. And since then, I haven't really looked back. I've really enjoyed the community organizing work that working in the Jewish community has allowed for me.
Thanks, James. Jennifer.
Hi, I'm Jennifer Gross. I'm the CEO of American Friends of Tel Aviv University. We exist to raise awareness, build the brand, and raise financial resources for Tel Aviv University, which is the largest university in Israel. I am sort of an accidental Jewish communal professional. Unlike Adina and James, I am tone deaf, so no musical abilities at all. I started out my career in finance. I was an investment banking analyst right out of school, and then switched to institutional money management. And then I was home for about 10 years with my now 23 and 25-year-old children. When I went back to work, in the hedge fund space, raising money for hedge funds from institutions. Did that for about 10 years. And I guess when I was home with the kids, and then when I went back to work subsequently in the hedge fund space, I got involved with philanthropy. And as I started to get more senior and I was able to do more interesting things philanthropically, it really excited me. And I had been so excited about my career and about helping institutions realize their spending needs and sort of, flying around the world and marketing hedge funds. And over time, the balance really shifted. And I became so excited about what I was able to do philanthropically, and specifically about the power of private philanthropy and what that makes possible. So around Passover 2014, I left the hedge fund where I was and really treated it as an inflection point, thought about kind of what I wanted to do for the next 10 years of my life. Got this incredible opportunity to go to work for UJA Federation of New York, where Adina and I met and were colleagues. I was there for about 5.5 years, where I ran a 70-person fundraising team composed of 7 different divisions, but UJA calls their trade and affinity campaign. And then it became a passion for me. Again, when I realized the power of private philanthropy and what people could make happen, it just, for me, became a calling. And I never thought I would leave UJA, but Israel really is my passion, as well as the notion of access to quality education being a great equalizer. So when I was approached with this role for Tel Aviv University, it sort of rang every bell. And about a little over a year and a half ago, I became CEO. And it's an incredible field to be in. I commend all of you who are my partners in the Jewish communal world.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jesse, tell us your story.
My story is exactly the same as theirs, except not at all.
Start with the saxophone.
Yeah, a little bit of a combination that I kind of can sing, but I only do it, not professionally. And like Jen, my path here was a complete accident, almost a wrong turn. I grew up in Minneapolis, Jewish, which meant, my grandparents forced my parents, so they forced me to Sunday school and religious school and Hebrew school for a bar mitzvah, and then I get kicked out. And I went to one AZA thing as a kid, and then I just moved on with my life. And I worked in the special event space for a long time, doing pretty high profile special events, and ended up working for the White House doing events for President Obama. And I was just about to turn 40 and spending about 300 nights a year in a hotel, which sounds awesome. And literally I traveled the world, which was incredible and exhausting. I had no personal life. There was no such thing as work-life balance. And I looked around and suddenly I was the old guy in every team that I worked on. And I was living in Milwaukee. I had been for a while, not connected to the JCC at all, had never been in the building, and had heard that they were going to be running a special event in a couple of years and hire somebody to do it. I had no idea at the time that you could make a living in a profession at nonprofit. In my head, nonprofit meant no money. And I had an expectation of a certain lifestyle where I wanted to be able to pay my bills. So I never gave nonprofit a thought. But fast forward, I met with their CEO and ended up being hired to run the JCC Maccabi games as a temp. It was going to be a 2-year temp gig, at which point my theory was I will have met enough people to find a real job in the community, or it didn't work out. I just go back on the road. It would work out to be right in the right timing for the presidential cycle. So ended up that the number 2 there had moved on to be a CEO in Charlotte, opening up that position, which I was invited to apply for. Did that for almost 3 years, and then was recruited down here to West Palm Beach, Florida. And so I guess where I figured out that when I saw the JCC Maccabi Games opening ceremonies, and you really see the connection that the impact you can have on kids and families at that point can change their life path, I was like, well, this feels good, and I have health insurance, so let's see if I can stick in this field. So not sexy, but it's kind of the path that brought me here.
Thanks, Jesse. And Hugh, your journey.
Thanks, Sue. It's great to be with everybody. This is already fun. I didn't know what I was going to do after college. I studied English literature because it was fun, because I enjoyed it, because I loved learning, and traveled for a couple of years and recognized that I had just the luxury of being able to figure out what I wanted to do instead of having to get a job, and really took that seriously as a privilege, and tried to take some time to really discern what was the right place for me. I figured out that I loved education, and got an emergency credential and taught in a public high school, which was sort of trial by fire, but really stimulating. And at the same time, I was teaching in an after-school program for high school students in a Jewish space. And at the end of teaching and then teaching on the side, I figured out I needed to do one or the other. And it felt to me like the work I was able to do in a Jewish space was more interesting to me, and more, I thought, potentially useful for students than what I was able to do in a more secular space. And that's been a sort of bellwether for me ever since, both that sense of what am I interested in, what is my passion, and what is kind of that end user, what is going to be potentially most useful for them. So I went to a rabbinical school really with the idea of being the kind of educator that I wanted to be. And still think of myself mostly as an educator, although James, the language of community organizing is becoming more and more a part of how I conceive of my role.
Thanks, Hugh, and thank you all. That was great. So pivoting to where there may be some interesting questions from that I imagine people who have chosen to take this elective. Our field is made up of professionals at so many different points of their professional journey. What advice would you give someone looking for advancement within the field, within the Jewish communal world? Or what do you wish someone had told you a few years ago? James, why don't we start with you on this one?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think that for folks who are looking to advance in their career building, I think that the idea of storytelling and learning how to tell stories is such an important part of my work. And it has been, it's a skill that I really learned while I was working in the JCC movement, that idea of being able to talk about the whole spectrum of the journey was really important. And it influences everything else that I do. It influences the work that we do in program development. It influences how we raise money at camp. And I think that learning how to tell stories and learning how to drive narrative in that way, both in terms of the work that you're doing, but I think also in terms of a personal narrative, right? One of the things that I'm most grateful for about our time together in the Mandel program was the time that it gave each of us to focus on our own personal narrative and the way that our own personal stories drive the kind of vision of the vision guided leadership that we bring to the table. So that storytelling, both in terms of the work in the field, in the moment, and also the personal storytelling, I think are really the place where I would find the most power.
Thanks, James. It's great. Adina, do you want any advice, any thoughts on that question?
Yes, James, I find your response very compelling. So thank you for sharing that. So I'm going to start by saying, in my experience, and mostly, I've seen that careers are built over time. There are rare occasions where, you start with a particular job early on in your career and you sort of stick with it for long enough and you sort of ascend slowly, in rank and within the same organization. But by and large, and certainly my experience was that my career was built over time. Post cantorial school, I spent a couple of years working in a day school, then a few in a summer camp, then about a 15-year stint at a couple different federations until I felt ready to take this step, right, in leading an organization and a small nonprofit. And this idea of career being built over time, for me, the guiding questions whenever I moved from one position to the next was always, there were three questions. What do I want to learn, right, out of this particular position? Who do I need to know, right? So it's about the people, the mentors, the teachers that are going to show me the way, the connections, the social, right, connections that are really important. And how do I want to grow, which is less about skills, but it's more about the personal development that I need to make as I'm ascending in my career and as I'm figuring out who I want to be when I grow up, so to speak, right? I also want to add that it's really important to know when it's time to move on, right? So as you're building your career and you're in a particular position, it's really important to know when it's time. And there's no magic formula here. It's something that you need to know for yourself, whether you've satisfied each of those three questions and you're sort of gotten everything you need to get out of a particular position, or sometimes it's just not working, culture-wise, and you're feeling like you're static or you're even moving backwards because of the culture or the organization or the fit. Or you don't feel like you're in flow anymore. If any of you remember that book from the 90s about where your challenge has to meet your level of skill, right? And then you'll be in flow. So sometimes at a certain point, like a job is no longer challenging, or they've changed the position or whatever it is. And it's too frustrating, too anxiety provoking because it's actually too complicated, or you don't have the right set of skills, right? And then the last thing I'll say, because it's important to just give a little nod here to the mentorship. I said it before, but it's so critical. Who are the mentors, and how can they point you in the direction? And I would be remiss not to mention that for me, in this most recent step, Doron Krakow was actually incredibly instrumental. I met him as one of the mentors in the Mandel Fellowship, and then when this position came up at Young Judaea Global, he called and said, I think you would be great for this position. You should consider applying. So just want to give a little shout out to Doron on that.
Great, thanks. And I like how both of you, you really talk about the intentionality of it, whether it's how we think about telling our stories, and also how we tell our stories and aspire for ourselves. So finding the time to have that own reflection so that you're going about it with that intentionality is so important. Thank you so much. a little bit different question for you, Hugh. Having made a recent change within the JCC field, and the situation in Los Gatos is unique, what would you say is the most important thing to consider when exploring a new opportunity? And I know
Yeah.
we touched on some of them, so.
Yeah, for sure. So just to say a word about the organization for which I work. So Jewish Silicon Valley emerged from the merger of the Jewish Federation of Silicon Valley and the APJCC. It was a change, definitely a change in job and a change in employer, but within the same building and for the same people. So just to clarify that. For me, I think really exploring that. I think Adina, you raised this question of fit, and I think really doing that exploration in terms of alignment in terms of mission, right? If we have a clear sense of our own perspective of the change that we want to make in the world and the way in which in a Jewish communal space, Judaism fits into that, really bringing a critical lens to the way the organization describes the change that it wants to see in the world and how Judaism fits into that. Because like when we look at mission statements, when we look at vision statements, it's very easy to say, oh yeah, that looks great, because they all look great at some level, but all of them are making choices about what to emphasize. And so to take a kind of critical lens to, what is this organization really trying to do, and what is it not trying to do? Like what is its emphasis, and is it seeing Judaism in the same way that I am? Because three Jews, two opinions, two Jews, three opinions. A lot of opinions about how Judaism fits into the work that we do. And I've been in situations where I've had that fit hasn't felt right in terms of the way that Judaism fits into the picture. So really to bring a critical lens to that, I think is important.
The Zoom error, I was muted. Thanks, Hugh, so much. That was great. Jesse, do you want to take a stab at that too, since you made a recent move?
Yeah, so, it's interesting when you think about what's next for me, which, most of us do at one point or another in the day, depending on your frustration level. I think for me, what I learned and still keep learning is that you're never ready. You're not sure if you can handle that next step, or you're not confident that you're ready to be a director or a COO or a CEO. And the secret is nobody's ever ready. And I think that you have to find within yourself that bit of either strength or resilience or courage or silliness or foolishness enough to say, what the heck, I'll give it a try. I came down to Palm Beach, Florida as the 10th CEO in 12 years. Now just do that math in your head for a second, the 10th CEO in 12 years. So my hope at that point was I could move the needle a tiny bit and be a hero. And if I don't, then I'm just the next guy that couldn't, handle this community. And so far I just crossed my 2-year mark yesterday, well today, so I hope I'll get a check. But so far we're doing okay. I've already outlasted 5 or 6 of them, so we're doing okay. But I think that the biggest thing is, have your eyes open for that next opportunity, and really look out of your comfort zone, out of your box. If you look at our panel, James went to a camp from a JCC. Adina went to Young Judaea from Federation, as Jen did to the American Friends. And I think that, our job as leaders in this field, and I think everybody here is a leader in our field, is to attract and retain good people. Now, whether that means at your JCC, at another JCC, or in the Jewish community, we certainly are better off as a field if we can keep them in the family. And the other thing I would say to consider is who's your kitchen cabinet, both inside your J and out, that you can really lean on for true feedback. You want to find the naysayer. You want to find that whether it's supervisor or friend who's going to say, are you sure? Are you really sure? And that they'll push you to do it, not just push you to stay because they don't want to have to fill your position. And I'll tell you a secret. There are way less of all of us than there need to be. It's why the Mandel Foundation started the program that we all did, was because Mort Mandel of blessed memory was totally convinced there are not enough qualified number twos and below who are ready to take on those big leadership roles. So really reevaluate your own value to our community, because a director of aquatics and recreation is the next COO. An early childhood site director is the next director of an early childhood program. There's no question that our movement doesn't exist without that progression. And so sometimes you got to say, oh, wow, I guess I could do that. And I'll repeat and I'll repeat and I'll repeat. Find a mentor, find somebody you can trust. And I know we've all talked about it before. Every one of us is open to the idea of talking to any of you, because we've all had people do it for us. I'm going to put my email and my number in the chat if anybody wants it, and I'm sure others will. But don't be afraid to be scared, because it's scary.
Thanks, Jesse. And I your comment about the pipeline, I think the same is true for qualified, quality COOs, assistant executive directors. There's a gap. There's a void of that rising leadership. So I think folks, a really important message, and I'm glad you said it, Jesse, is see yourself in these roles. See yourself as being able to take it on, and you learn a lot in trying for it, and you learn a lot in doing it. And the field is large. There's so many people you could turn to for questions and advice. When I was a sitting COO, I had my 2 or 3 go-to people who were also COOs, that, and the field is here to support each other. So have confidence in your ability to make some of these moves. Let's take it outside of the JCC world just for a second. James and Jennifer, you both work outside of, and Adina also, but outside of the JCC world right now. What skills do you think are most valuable for the work in the larger Jewish communal space? Jen, do you want to take that one first?
Sure. I was thinking about what I thought would be most helpful, just sort of to pass along. I think a few things. One is caring deeply, caring about the mission, caring about those you're serving, caring about your staff, really leading with your heart and being authentic. When people know you're in it and you're invested and you care about them personally, it creates the culture that you're looking for. It sends the message that you want. And I think it enables you to really lead by example and to help attract and retain the best people, because people want to work with someone who inspires them and whose vision they believe in and who they know is authentic. I think being communicative is another skill. Oftentimes, as a CEO, you have to be or as any senior leader, you have to be very careful about what you say, because people tend to invest meaning in your words that you may or may not have meant. And so you need to be sure that you're really communicating what you want, what you mean, and why. And it's not necessarily always a democracy or always a conversation or a debate, but it's important for people to understand and to see the larger picture and understand that they fit into a larger picture and they're not sort of pigeonholed into one area. But I think when people understand what you expect and what you're trying to achieve and where they fit into it, and that they're part of a larger whole, it's a much more meaningful experience. I think honesty is tremendously important. It's okay if you don't know the answers. You need to get the answers. You don't need to know everything, and you won't know everything. And you probably shouldn't know everything, but you should know how to find it. And it's okay to say to whether it's to clients, to donors, to your staff, let me check, let me get back to you. Whenever you're in a difficult conversation or a difficult situation, you always, always, always want to be honest. You never want to be in a situation where something you say is not accurate and will come back to you. And I think honesty goes a long way, even if it's you don't know, or you're really sorry, or sort of opening yourself up and being vulnerable goes a long way. Appreciating different perspectives is important. the Jewish communal world is quite varied in hashkafas and in perspectives, and you have to really be open to those ideas and potentially those people who make you uncomfortable and who don't agree with your personal, professional, philosophical, social, economic leanings. And you have to appreciate them and appreciate their perspectives and where they're coming from and what their motivation is. Modeling the behavior that you want is critical. You need to be the person you're expecting your employees to be, and you want them to aspire to. They need to see a role model, and that needs to be you. And for those of you who are in smaller communities, that needs to be you in the grocery store, and that needs to be you in the gym, and that needs to be you in restaurants, and wherever you are, you're wearing sort of the name tag of your organization, and you want to make sure that you're representing it in a way that would make you and would make your organization proud.
Thank you. Every JCC professional knows about running into someone in a restaurant when your kids are having a moment. Like, we've all been there. And it is an important, it's a big responsibility to keep that hat on at all times. James, do you want to share anything in this?
Yeah, Jen talked very concretely about some of the hard skills that are so important. I want to talk just a minute about some of the other, just a couple of other pieces. I think a lot of what she said is I would echo. I think about management style and talent management as being really critical and some of the most valuable skills that I think leaders can have. Learning not just how to help folks plot a course in their trajectory, and sort of plot that next pin on their map of their professional career, but celebrating and learning how to celebrate and support folks in their journey, even when that means their journey is going to take them away from your institution, and even when that's going to be difficult for your institution, right? Really learning how to celebrate that is key. I think that management style is critical in learning how to let folks that you work with and that you support make decisions, and how you support them and honor those decisions. Really thinking about that advice process and how we give feedback, and then how we support our staff team in making decisions. I think learning how to make decisions and becoming comfortable with those decisions is the single biggest challenge that we have in training the next generation of leadership. And so it's something that we're, as agencies, I think we're often not so good at, and it's a skill that we are going to need desperately if we're gonna raise up another generation of incredible leaders, which we have sitting right here in this room with all of you. I think that in terms of other skills that I think are so critical, we've talked a lot about storytelling, and I think that the fundraising pieces of our work are going to be, we've seen how important those have been over the last year and a half. I think that that will continue to be and perhaps grow in its importance. And so learning about that work and the skills that are involved in that have been really critical to my own personal development. They've been really joyful, and it's work that I personally really love. And so learning how to love that work, and learning how to connect your team with it, with appreciating and loving that work, I think is going to be is really important.
Thanks. Thank you, guys. Sometimes I forget I'm like moderating this. I just get caught up in your answers. I'm like, that is so wise. Thank you all. Earlier, James referenced vision guided leadership, and it's certainly something we all spent a lot of time with through the Mandel Executive Leadership Program. And it's not like a magic, like you have to go to a 2-year program to be engaged with that. But what would you recommend to aspiring professionals in being a vision guided leader, and about their own professional vision, within the Jewish communal work? What kind of guidance would you give in that space? Adina, you want to take a stab at that?
Sure. So I think this is really one of the most important questions that we can ask and that people should be asking and thinking about throughout their entire career and their career development. Before I took the leap to becoming a senior manager within Federation, I remember my mentor at the time, Drew Greenwood, who was the prior executive director of that department, said to me, doesn't matter what happens, how a day feels, how frustrated you are, what you're dealing with in a day-to-day, always stay grounded in your why. And she just left me with that, like, here's this little nugget. And it's just something that I went back to repeatedly because it's so true. It's, and there's, here is where I'll differentiate and I'll say it's about connecting, first of all, uncovering, right? And then having real clarity about your own personal why, right? The why are you doing this? Why do you wake up every morning to do what you do? And it's the bigger why question. It's not just about the job itself, right? It's your existential question. And thinking very deeply about how the job that you're doing in the moment or the career that you're developing, how it connects, how it links up with that why, how it aligns, is really critical. It's critical to your own job satisfaction. It's critical to whether or not you're going to be successful, whether people see you as authentic, right? Like authentic in doing what you're doing and selling it, but in a real way. And it has to constantly be checked. And I would say that it's probably the thing that kept me going all of the years in, sometimes I was involved in jobs or in positions that weren't so satisfying or that were frustrating for various reasons. And many of you, might be either in settings that are frustrating, or you're working with colleagues that might be frustrating, or you're not in your ideal, but it's a stepping stone, right? So like, what gets you through each of those days, each and every day, right? It's really about staying connected to the why am I doing this to begin with? And if you start to feel like this doesn't advance my why, it does not. So that might be a moment, right, again, to rethink, either to make a change or to make it a temporary, stepping stone, but be intentional about it so that you know why you're in the place you are and why you're moving on. And I would say that it was really for me the differentiator in many positions when I was with colleagues who were playing, I'll take like a play out of, to quote another cynic, his most recent book, the Infinite Game, right? That a lot of people that you're actually in, that you're working with are playing for the moment, right? Like they want to win in the thing that you're in right now, and you're stuck in like a cycle and a competition, but having your why, like that ultimate why, and thinking about what you're doing professionally, how it advances that existential piece, that actually puts you in a totally different frame. Like you're not playing that game, the day-to-day game or the month-to-month game, right? Or from a performance standpoint, you are working toward an infinite game, right? Which is like a much bigger, so it's just a reframe. So, to whatever extent that helps, just get clarity on your why and hold fast to it.
I love that. Always about the why. Thank you. Hugh, I know vision guided leadership is a North Star for you very often. What do you think?
Yeah, and I really appreciate what Adina just said about the importance of the why. I think that's really critical. I'm going to drop into the chat an article that I just read this morning, just came out this morning in Jewish Philanthropy, about the difference between outcomes and outputs, because I think it relates. Just that sense of so much of what we get consumed by is producing stuff, producing programs. And that's important, but it's not really the point, right? The point is that the outcomes, what change, again, the why for me is what change do I want to see in the world? How is that user going to change, benefit, grow, improve their lives based on what we're doing? And to be reframing from, I'm busy, I've got to do this stuff to have outputs and put out stuff in the world and justify my role, to how am I improving the world? I think that's both inspiring for us, but also like it really to lift up that conversation with our peers. I think it really helps give a sense of meaning and purpose to the work that we do. And I think people are hungry for that conversation. And I think we're all a little bit like reticent, embarrassed to have it. Like it becomes kind of an assumed thing. But when we surface it, I think it can really make a difference in terms of that sense of meaning and purpose. So kind of lifting up, not being embarrassed, apologetic for having like real conversations about what are we trying to accomplish? What is the outcome here that we're trying to have in the world? And it's not just about program production for the sake of program production. Yeah.
It's beautiful. Thank you. It was like, that was very heavy. Thank you. That was great. That landed for me for sure. We're gonna leave. We're gonna have time for some questions from you all. So I already got a question in chat. Feel free to send those questions. Either put them to everyone, send them to Yael, or as I said earlier, use the raise hand feature, and we'd love to hear your voice in dialogue with any one of the people on our panel, or you could ask something of all of us. The question that came to me was specifically for our friends who are, or some of our friends at least, who are new CEOs. So Jennifer, if you could address, as a new CEO, what have you found to be the most valuable skill or component in either advancing your career or in your new role, or however you want to take that question?
Okay. Another sort of few pointers or tips that have really worked for me. I'm trying to be practical. I think James and I are a great yin and yang together. You'll get like the complete hard and soft skills picture. I think working harder, having a work ethic, really being all the way in it, being completely committed and just really driven about what you're doing, asking questions, diving deeply into what you're doing and trying to understand the whole picture, not just the narrow slice that's yours. As leaders, we want to see people who are invested in the organization's mission and in what you can do to drive that mission. And we're not necessarily so interested in you staying in your lane. It's sort of that NYPD, I guess, expression, if you see something, say something. We want to know that you care about the organization as a whole and that you're invested in trying to make it a better place. Treat the organization as if you own it. It's sort of a continuation of what I just said. Be invested in what the organization is doing. If you walk down the hall and there's a piece of paper on the floor, stop and pick it up. If the bathrooms are a mess, clean it, call whoever it's supposed to be called. If you see the sign out front is dirty or rusted or broken, you need to have pride in your organization and you need to show that you care and you're a leader. Be collaborative. Don't be looking to take credit. You're going to get the most credit for building up those you work with and your colleagues. And, the best leaders have the best people working for them and with them. And you want to be collaborative. You want to be known as someone who people can count on to work with them, to jump in, to join cross-organizational, cross-functional teams. Those kind of good corporate citizens are the people that leaders will look for when they're looking for leadership or more senior roles. Being seen as someone who's sort of territorial or protective of their fiefdom is definitely, in my mind at least, a red flag. When you're a leader, you need to inspire people to be on your bus. Everyone's not necessarily going to work directly for you, and you want to make sure that people are inspired to be on this mission, this crazy and sometimes wild ride with you. You want to be inspirational, and you want them to come from a position of strength and excitement to join you and to share in the successes of your leadership and your organization. You always want to be someone people can depend on. When someone needs something, or the organization needs something, or the leader of your organization needs something, you want to be that person that's on speed dial. You want it to be known that you're someone who can get things done, who doesn't drop the ball, who's always dependable. And again, you might not always have the answer, and you might not always be able to get the answer, but you need to make sure that you're being communicative and you're working through it, and you're dependable. You're always someone who can be counted on. Follow through, follow through, follow through. Success is all in the follow through. Not just saying, oh, I made the call. Oh, I followed up. I sent the email. No leader wants to hear that. We want to hear, you didn't get through on the phone. Did you send an email? Did you call a day later? How were you creative in trying to reach the person? Not just, oh, I called, I tried. Be organized. Organization will be so helpful. The more you have on your plate and the more responsibility you have, the more organized you are, the more you'll be able to get things done and keep all the plates sort of spinning or all the balls in the air. So be that person who's organized and who you create a system that works for you. We all have different systems that work. Find one that works for you that can allow you to keep your work, your life, your personal life organized and sort of present and accounted for.
Thanks, Jennifer. That's a wonderful toolkit that folks can consider putting together. Jesse, do you want to take a stab at that also as a new CEO? You're not so new anymore. Gosh, it's like been a couple of years. I keep thinking it's new, but you've had hurricanes, you've had COVID, you've had your time there for sure. It's 2 years that feels like 10, but
every day is a new day in paradise here in the land of the palm trees. You know, I think that the biggest thing that I try to remind myself, and it's the small things that matter, and it's all about culture. And I think that, you know, I've done a lot of stupid things in my 2 years. I made a lot of mistakes, but I've done a couple things right. One of the things I did is I had a one-on-one meeting with every single staff person, whether you were a, you know, part-time teacher in our preschool or, you know, our managing director of one of our facilities. And it was on Zoom because we were still in COVID land, but the fact, I underestimate the impact that it has on them that they get 15 minutes of the CEO's time. And it's a brain shift for me, and I hope for some of you, to think of your role different than you think of yourself. I think of myself as the same goofy pain in the butt I was in 8th grade, but here I wear a title and I'm trusted by the community with this title of president and CEO that means something. I'm still the same putz I always was. They just don't think that. Or at least
we know that.
Or they don't. Yeah, all my friends do, of course. And all my Milwaukee friends do that I see on the screen. But I think that those little things like giving them the time, you can do that at every level. I don't care if you're the lead teacher and there's an assistant teacher, make them understand that their time, your time is valuable enough to give to, they are valuable enough to take your time. I send a text to everybody on their birthday. It sounds silly. We used to send birthday cards. I think we still do. But in this day and age, for most of our staff, just getting a quick text, and I've heard feedback that, you know, I got a text from the CEO. I didn't even know who knew who he was, that he knew who I was. I don't know who they all are. I can't. But I have great support, and my admin puts in my calendar that, you know, it's Judy's birthday and her cell phone is this. And it takes me 11 seconds to type, "Hi, it's Jesse Rosen from the J. Just want to say happy birthday and thanks for everything you do." Boom, done. And it's either going to have no impact or good impact. You can't make a mistake. It's like I always say, you can't make a mistake going to pay a condolence call. Nobody's going to ever say, "I can't believe they came." I think one of the biggest things, don't be afraid to screw up and own it when you do. People have this false view that the higher up the food chain you go, the less you're going to screw up. It's actually the opposite. It's the more, and it's the bigger impact that your mistakes have. The trick, and I learned it from an old boss really early on, and it was so valuable, is own it and apologize and move on. Because once you've really apologized and tried to make amends and screw up something different next time, there's not much more they can do about it. Like, we can't go backwards, so let's keep moving. I think that to find and truly enable a supportive team is going to make you all the difference. And I don't care if you run a preschool with 40 people, or you run an agency with hundreds, or you run a small program with 3 direct reports. If they don't have your back, you're screwed. I don't care how good you are, you will not survive. And so creating a culture where your team knows it's a two-way street. We have leadership team meetings where I say, you're here because you're the smart people on my team, not because of your position. And allowing people to be honest and building a trust that they can tell you how they feel, even if you're screwing up, is going to help you in the long run. And it really sucks to hear sometimes, but in the long run, it's the only thing you're going to be able to do, because you can't, as you go up the food chain and your purview gets wider, I can't know everything that goes on. And the hard thing for my brain is I have to stop trying to. I have to say, it's actually great that I don't know that we're fighting with this vendor, or that this raccoon in in the dumpster or that we have alligators in a swamp, all things that we've dealt with in the last week. But it's getting a team that you trust and trusts you, so the things you start to know what has to rise up, and that's where you spend your time.
Thanks, Jesse. And you hit a lot of really important points. The apologizing, it's important that we do that with the people that need to hear those apologies. Humility goes a really long way in leadership, and I think we've all been hopefully sharing that message. I got a question actually just sent to me that very often in moving within the Jewish communal world requires moving, actually physically moving, and what impact that might have on a family. I'm going to actually ask James to respond to that, because I believe you relocated with a family, or perhaps somewhere. Your family was growing at the time.
Yeah, yes. I think I've had times in my career where an opportunity meant a relocation. I grew up in a military family, and so for me, that felt somewhat normal, because I'd never lived anywhere longer than 4 years when I was a kid. Now, for my partner Jen, I'll speak for her and my two daughters. The experience of having that place of feeling home was really important, and it as Adina said, it's about knowing your why. And I think that your why can be both your work, and your why should and can be about your family as well. I think that in making a decision to relocate, which is often a really important pathway toward advancement, if that's your motivating factor. I think it's when we used to move in the military, I often would be hesitant to go. And my dad would say to me, wherever we are, we're home, because that's what the base is, right? Whenever we are on a base, we're home. And there were hallmark experiences that I remember as a kid that were the same, whether I lived in Omaha, Nebraska, or whether I was living in Neubrücke, Germany. And I think that the same thing is true moving in the Jewish community. One of the things I loved about the J in Los Gatos, and a thing I loved about my work at the J in Springfield, and a thing that I love about working now at camp in Madison, is that our staff team gets together for Shabbat at the end of every week, right? Those hallmark moments, they're the same, because wherever you go inside the Jewish community, you're home. So that's been at least the way that I've framed it for myself.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think we've had a lot of themes here, this one being about the fit, and that's the job, the community, the mentor, and obviously for your family as well. So before I let you guys off the stage, even though we have just 2 minutes, I'm going to ask you, I should take the last 2 minutes to answer a question that came up in chat. Maybe you could answer it in chat so that everyone could hear the answers. We have a lot of people who they're not necessarily even aspiring for themselves to move up, but they want to help their people that report to them. So as managers, what could someone do to help their most talented team members develop skills, advance their career? What advice would you give to a manager? I will take the privilege of having the microphone and saying, be open to them moving, be open to them advancing. That's the first thing. Once you're there, and psychologically you're okay with them advancing, and you don't feel like you're losing, but that we're all gaining. What are the skills, or what are the steps that a manager could take to support their staff? I'll ask you to put that into chat, and I will thank, with deep gratitude, Adina and James and Jennifer and Jesse and Hugh. I'm guessing you all can imagine what our 2-year experience was like with these 6 voices around the table, plus the 10 others in our cohort, in our fellowship. We had all points of view, all amazing deep discussions, and I have great gratitude to the 5 of you for carving time out today to give to the JCC field from your experience and your perspective. Lots of contact information was shared in chat. You could also connect with any of these panelists through the SpotMe platform. And I also saw one of our sponsors, Spiritus I want to get the proper name so I don't mess it up. I'm sorry. What's the full name? The Spartus Institute.
Spartus Institute for Jewish Leadership and Learning. Yeah.
Thank you. They're deeply in this space of professional development as well. They have a booth in the live virtual vendor hall, which follows in just a few minutes. So we've got the virtual vendor hall. I mentioned at the beginning. Please take a few minutes, visit some of our sponsors. They're amazingly supportive of our field and are all here to help the JCCs be better. If you have a trusted advising session, you should have that link. And please, please, please join us at 3 o'clock for our closing movement moment. I can't even speak anymore. It's been 3 days of talking. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to my dear friends and colleagues on this panel. Have a great day, everybody.